The kid behind the counter looked inside the box of VHS tapes, picked one up, read the handwritten label, Christmas morning 1991, and dropped it back in. "Yeah, old VHS tapes. Nobody buys these. I can do $5 for the box." Russell Pence stood on the other side of the counter. 80 years old, the brown corduroy flat cap his late wife Vivian had bought him at J.C. Penney in 1997 pulled square on his head, the cardboard box of VHS tapes sitting on the glass between them, and watched a 23-year-old in a Pawn King polo look at 30 years of his wife's recordings and see $5 worth of dead media. "Those were my wife's," Russell said quiet. The kid, Holden by the crooked name tag, shrugged and pushed the box an inch across the glass with the back of his knuckles. "Sure, 5, final." Here's what that kid in the pawn shop didn't know. Here's what nobody in that shop knew. The cardboard box contained 26 VHS tapes. 25 of them were home recordings, Vivian's meticulous handwriting on every label. Easter brunch, 1989, Kevin's first steps, Dad's 71st birthday, Christmas morning, 1991. Each one was a small piece of a family's life, recorded on a Magnavox 5CR in a living room in Muncie, Indiana, over the course of 3 decades. Each one was priceless to Russell and worthless to a pawn shop. But the 26th tape, sitting at the very bottom of the box, underneath all the home recordings, still sealed in its original cellophane shrink wrap with the Sears price sticker on the spine, reading $49.95, was not a home recording. It was a 1977 Magnetic Video Corporation first pressing VHS of The Sound of Music, and it had never been opened. Magnetic Video Corporation of Farmington Hills, Michigan, was the first company in American history to license Hollywood films for home video release. In 1977, Magnetic Video released 50 titles on VHS and Betamax, the first 50 commercial home video tapes ever sold in the United States. The Sound of Music was title number 23. The retail price was $49.95. An enormous sum in 1978, when the average weekly grocery bill for a family of 4 was $38. Almost nobody bought them. Almost nobody kept them sealed. The idea of buying a movie you could only watch at home was so new that most consumers couldn't understand why they would pay $50 for something they could see on television for free. Vivian Pence had understood. The Sound of Music was her favorite movie. She had seen it 11 times in the theater between 1965 and 1972. She had bought the VHS at the Sears in the Muncie Mall in November of 1978, 2 months after the Pences had bought their first VCR, a top-loading RCA that weighed 31 pounds. She had brought the tape home and set it on the kitchen counter, and Russell had looked at the price sticker and said, "Vivian, you paid $50 for a movie? I can tape it off Channel 13 next time they show it." And Vivian, who had never in 40 years of marriage won an argument with Russell about money, had put the tape in the box with the blank tapes and the home recordings and had not mentioned it again. She had not opened it. She had not watched it. She had been too embarrassed by the price to take it out of the box in front of Russell, and she had been too proud to return it, and over the next 46 years, the sealed tape had migrated to the bottom of the box and had stayed there, buried under the accumulating weight of the family's home recordings for the rest of Vivian's life. Sealed, first pressing 1977 Magnetic Video VHS tapes are the rarest category of home video collectible in the world. Of the 50 titles released, only a handful of sealed examples are known to survive. The last sealed Magnetic Video Sound of Music to surface at auction at Heritage in 2021 had sold for $28,000. The tape in Russell's box, with its original Sears sticker and unbroken cellophane, was about to be appraised at $32,000. This is the story of how Russell Pence walked into Pawn King on a Tuesday morning in February with $420 of trouble in his head and walked out with the discovery that the movie his wife had been too embarrassed to admit she'd bought, the $50 indulgence she had hidden in a box for 46 years, was now the most valuable single object in their household. And the most Vivian thing about it was that she'd been right all along, and she'd never gotten to know it. Before I tell you what happened when the expert walked through that door, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me tell you about Russell. Russell Dean Pence was born in 1944 in Muncie, Indiana. His father, Lloyd Pence, drove a delivery truck for the Muncie Star Press for 31 years. His mother, Edna, worked the front desk at Ball Memorial Hospital for 27 years. Russell went to Muncie Central High, the school from Hoosiers, though the movie came later, graduated in 1962, did 4 years in the Air Force as a ground equipment mechanic at Wright-Patterson, came home and spent 36 years at the Borg-Warner transmission plant on Kilgore Avenue. Married Vivian Howell in 1967. 2 sons, Kevin, now 55 and living in Fort Wayne, and Lloyd, named for Russell's father, 52, in Indianapolis. Vivian had died last April of a cerebral hemorrhage. Sudden, in the garden on a Saturday afternoon, the pruning shears still in her hand. The car insurance was the problem. The 2005 Buick Century, Vivian's car, the car she'd picked and he'd kept, was due for its semi-annual insurance renewal in March. The premium had jumped to $840 for 6 months because of the rate increases across Indiana. Russell had paid the first installment of $420 in September from savings. The savings were now gone. The second installment was due in 3 weeks. His Borg-Warner pension was $1,510 a month. Social Security added $2,170. After property taxes on the small ranch house on Hackley Street, the gas, the electric, his blood pressure medications, and groceries, he had about $110 of slack in a good month. He did not have $420. He could have called Kevin in Fort Wayne or Lloyd in Indianapolis. Kevin was a UPS driver whose wife had been on reduced hours since September. Lloyd was a high school basketball coach, supplementing his salary by refereeing rec league games on weekends. Russell had not asked either of his sons for $1 in 19 years. He was not going to start over car insurance. For 6 days, he looked at the insurance notice on the Formica table and ate Vivian's last frozen casseroles from the chest freezer, the ones the church ladies had brought in April that he'd been stretching through the winter. On the 7th morning, Tuesday, he went to the living room cabinet. The cabinet was a 1988 oak entertainment center Vivian had picked out at Value City Furniture the year they bought the VCR. The VHS tapes filled the 2 lower shelves in the bottom compartment, 26 tapes in a cardboard box, plus a few loose ones Vivian had kept separate for reasons Russell had never asked about. Russell had not opened the cabinet since Vivian's funeral. He had not watched television since April. The screen was dark. The remote was on the TV stand where Vivian had left it. Vivian had been the family's archivist. She had recorded everything: first steps, first words, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, 4th of July picnics, school plays, the boys' basketball games. This was Muncie. Basketball was not optional. The trip to Gatlinburg in 1994, Lloyd's wedding in 2001, Kevin's daughter's baptism in 2006. Every tape was labeled in Vivian's careful handwriting with a fine point Sharpie, the event, the date, and sometimes a small annotation. Kevin scores 22 points, or Lloyd cries during vows. Don't tell him I wrote this. Russell had not watched the tapes. He could not watch the tapes. Watching the tapes meant hearing Vivian's voice behind the camera, the small comments she made while recording, the laugh, the hold still. Kevin, I'm getting this. And Russell was not ready to hear Vivian's voice. He did not know if he would ever be ready. But the insurance was $420, and the tapes were the only thing in the house he could think of that someone might pay for. And so he pulled the cardboard box out of the bottom compartment and carried it to the kitchen table. Vivian Howell had been the kind of woman who remembered everything and said almost nothing about it. She remembered the date of every birthday, every anniversary, every first day of school. She remembered which neighbor had brought which casserole when Russell's mother died in 1998. She remembered which hymn had been sung at their wedding. How great thou art, Second verse skipped because the organist lost her place, and she mentioned it every June without fail. She had the kind of memory that made her indispensable and the kind of temperament that made her invisible, and Russell had relied on both for 56 years without ever quite saying so. The one thing Vivian had wanted for herself, the one thing she had bought with her own desire and not for someone else's need, was a $50 VHS tape of her favorite movie. And Russell had told her it was a waste, and she had put it in a box and never mentioned it again because that was what Vivian did with the things she wanted. She put them away. Russell had not known that about his wife until the morning he found the tape. He had not known that a woman could carry a $50 embarrassment in a cardboard box for 46 years and never once bring it up. He had not known that the most expensive thing Vivian had ever bought for herself was still sealed in its cellophane in the bottom of a box of family recordings, underneath every birthday and every Christmas and every first step and every wedding, the one thing she'd wanted buried beneath everything she'd given. He sat there with the box in front of him and the insurance notice 3 inches from his coffee mug, and he did something he'd sworn he would never do. He put the box in the back seat of the Buick and drove to town. Pawn King sat on McGalliard Road between a Taco Bell and a vape shop. The bell over the door jangled as Russell stepped inside. Holden was behind the counter on his phone and looked up after about 10 seconds. "Help you?" "I've got a box of old VHS tapes. Was wondering..." "VHS?" Holden made a face. "Man, we don't really take VHS. Nobody's got a player anymore. What's on 'em?" "Home recordings mostly. Family stuff. Christmas. Birthdays." "Yeah, can't sell home recordings, Pops. That's somebody else's Christmas, you know." Holden actually looked a little sympathetic for a moment. Then he glanced in the box. "Any movies in there? Store-bought?" "I'm not sure. My wife packed the box." Holden reached into the box, pulled out a tape, Kevin's First Steps, March 1972, looked at it, and set it on the counter. He pulled out another, Easter Brunch 1989, and set it beside the first. He dug around in the box without much care, lifting tapes and letting them drop back in. "Yeah, all home recordings, $5 for the box. Honestly, I'm being generous. We'll probably just toss them. Nobody wants them." $5? "5. I can't sell memories, Pops. I can only sell product." Russell's hands were flat on the counter. His jaw was tight. He thought about Vivian in the garden. He thought about Vivian behind the camera, laughing, saying, "Hold still, I'm getting this." He thought about 46 years of a marriage compressed into 26 VHS tapes in a cardboard box on a pawn shop counter and a boy who couldn't sell memories. He did not pick up the box. He did not say yes. He did not say no. He stood there with both hands flat on the glass and his mouth closed tight because the only other thing he could do was cry in front of a 23-year-old, and Russell Pence had not cried in front of another human being since Vivian's funeral in April. The bell over the door jangled again. A woman came in, early 50s, tall, with short dark hair and a pixie cut going silver at the temples, bright hazel eyes behind red cat-eye glasses, and a wide, warm face with freckles. She wore a long gray wool coat over a burgundy turtleneck and dark jeans, brown leather boots, and a black canvas tote bag with a Goodwill Finds patch ironed on the side, the mark of a professional thrift store hunter. She had a paper coffee cup in one hand and a dog-eared copy of Goldmine magazine in the other. She came 2 steps inside, glanced at the counter, and stopped. She looked at the box of VHS tapes. She set the coffee on a glass case and stepped forward. She tilted her head. She looked at the tapes Holden had set on the counter. She looked back at the box. She reached over, not touching, just looking, and tilted the box slightly toward herself to see the tapes stacked inside. Her eyes went to the bottom of the box. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was warm and quick. "Sir, is that a sealed tape at the bottom of this box?" Russell blinked. I don't know, ma'am. I haven't been through the whole box." Holden looked up. "Lady, it's $5 for the box. You want it?" The woman did not look at Holden. She looked at Russell. "Sir, my name is Claire Ashworth. I am a media format archivist. That's a real job, I promise. And I run the Analog Archive, a private consultancy in Indianapolis that appraises and preserves vintage home video and audio formats. I consult for Heritage Auction's Entertainment Memorabilia Division and for the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. I'm in Muncie today, buying a reel-to-reel collection from an estate. I came in here because I always stop at pawn shops. Would you permit me to look at the tape at the bottom of this box?" Russell found his voice. "You're asking me?" "It's yours, isn't it?" "It was my wife's." "Then yes, sir, I'm asking you." Holden made a face, but he stepped back. Claire Ashworth set her tote bag on the counter and opened it. She drew out a pair of thin white cotton handling gloves, the same kind the card authenticator had used, a small LED pen light, a 5x folding desk loop, and a leather-bound notebook. She pulled the gloves on. "May I?" Russell nodded. Claire carefully lifted the home recording tapes out of the box one at a time, reading each label as she went, setting each one gently on the counter. She handled them with more care than Holden had. She held each tape by the edges, never touching the label side. She worked her way down through the box. Lloyd's Wedding 2001, Gatlinburg 1994, Kevin scores 22 points, Christmas Morning 1991. She set each one down the way a librarian shelves a book, spine out, label visible, in order. Then she reached the bottom of the box. The tape at the bottom was different. It was heavier. It was still sealed in its original cellophane shrink wrap. The cellophane yellowed and slightly brittle but intact, no tears, no openings. There was a white price sticker on the spine. Sears, $49.95. The front of the tape's cardboard slipcase showed a photograph of Julie Andrews spinning in an alpine meadow. The Magnetic Video Corporation logo, a blue and white geometric design that had not existed since 1982, was in the upper left corner. The title, in the original 1977 typography, read, "The Sound of Music." Claire Ashworth went still. She picked the tape up with both gloved hands. She turned it over. She examined the back of the slipcase. The film credits, the running time, the catalog number, the magnetic video address in Farmington Hills, Michigan. She looked at the cellophane. She looked at the Sears sticker. She brought the folding loop to her eye and examined the shrink-wrap seal along the top edge. She set the tape down on the counter. She took off her gloves. She took off her red cat eye glasses, closed her eyes, opened them, put the glasses back on. "Mr. Pence. Russell Pence." "Mr. Pence, do you know what Magnetic Video Corporation was?" "No, ma'am." In 1977, a man named Andre Blais, working out of a small office in Farmington Hills, Michigan, became the first person in American history to license Hollywood films for home video distribution. He made a deal with 20th Century Fox. He released 50 titles on VHS and Betamax. They were the first 50 commercial home videotapes ever sold in the United States. Before Andre Blais, there was no such thing as buying a movie to watch at home. He invented the concept. She picked the tape back up. The Sound of Music was title number 23 on the magnetic video list. It retailed for $49.95, an extraordinary price in 1978. Very few were sold. Of the few that were sold, almost all were opened and watched because that was the point. The number of sealed, unopened, first-pressing, magnetic video VHS tapes that survive in original cellophane with original retail stickers is, in the entire documented market. And I know this market, Mr. Pence. I've spent 22 years in it, approximately 30 to 40 across all 50 titles. For The Sound of Music specifically, there are 4 known sealed examples. The last one that surfaced at auction, Heritage 2021, sold for $28,000. The fluorescent tube over the door flickered. This one, Mr. Pence, with the original Sears sticker intact, which adds provenance and period retail documentation, would, in my professional opinion, be valued between $28,000 and $38,000, Conservative estimate, $32,000. Holden's mouth was open. His phone was face down on the counter. His hands were in his pockets. "Mr. Pence," Claire said, "do you know why your wife had this tape?" Russell looked at the sealed cellophane. He looked at the Sears sticker. He looked at the spinning Julie Andrews on the front of the slipcase. And he heard Vivian's voice in his head, not from a tape, from memory, saying, in the kitchen of the house on Hackley Street in November of 1978, "Russell, I bought something at Sears today." And Russell saying, "What did you buy?" And Vivian holding up the tape, and Russell looking at the price sticker, and Russell saying the thing he had said, "You paid $50 for a movie? I can tape it off Channel 13. And Vivian putting the tape in the box and never mentioning it again. For 46 years. "Yes, ma'am," Russell said. His voice was not steady. "I know why she had it. It was her favorite movie. She saw it 11 times in the theater. She bought this tape because she wanted to own it, and I told her it was a waste of money." He paused. "She never opened it. She put it in the box and she never said another word about it. I didn't know it was there. She died last April. I found it today." Claire Ashworth looked at him for a long moment. Then she said very gently, "She was right, Mr. Pence. It wasn't a waste of money." Nobody in the shop spoke. Claire handed Russell her card. "Mr. Pence, take your time, talk to your sons, but please, sir, do not leave this tape, or this box, in this shop. The home recordings are not worth money, but they are worth more than money, and this sealed tape is both." Russell nodded. He watched Claire set the sealed Sound of Music back at the bottom of the box. She stacked the home recordings back on top, carefully, in order. She closed the flaps. She handed the box to Russell with both hands. Russell took the box. He tucked it under his arm. He nodded once at Claire. He walked out past Holden without a word. In the parking lot, sitting in the Buick with the February sun thin and cold through the windshield, Russell Pence held the box on his lap and cried for the first time since Vivian's funeral. He called Kevin that night. He called Lloyd. The two sons drove to Muncie the following Saturday. The three of them sat at the Formica kitchen table on Hackley Street with the box open between them. They looked at the home recordings first. Lloyd picked up "Lloyd Cries During Vows," "Don't Tell Him I Wrote This," and laughed until he cried. Kevin held Kevin's First Steps, March 1972, in both hands and said very quietly, "Mom filmed everything." Then Russell reached to the bottom of the box and pulled out the sealed Sound of Music and set it on the table and told them the story, the Sears sticker, the $50, the thing Russell had said in the kitchen in 1978, the 46 years. Kevin looked at the tape. Lloyd looked at the tape. Then Kevin looked at his father and said, "Dad, Mom was always right." "I know she was," Russell said. "I should have told her more." They called Claire Ashworth at 9 the following Monday. Heritage Auctions authenticated the tape in their Dallas offices in March. The cellophane was confirmed unbroken. The Sears sticker was confirmed period correct. The SKU matched the Sears 1978 holiday catalog listing for magnetic video titles. The slipcase was in near mint condition, minor yellowing at the edges, consistent with 46 years of boxed storage. The tape graded VGA 85+, sealed. Heritage listed it in their April entertainment memorabilia sale. Bidding opened at $15,000. It closed at $31,000. After commission, the Pence family received $27,600. Russell split it 3 ways. A third for himself, a third for Kevin, a third for Lloyd. He told both boys to use their share however they wanted and not to argue. He paid the car insurance. He paid the property taxes 2 years forward. He had the furnace serviced because it had been making a sound Vivian would have noticed, and he hadn't. He bought Vivian a new headstone. The funeral home's temporary marker had already begun to lean, with her full name and a line beneath that read, "Wife, Mother." She was right about the movie. He kept the home recordings. He did not sell them. He did not watch them. He put them back in the cabinet on the 2 lower shelves where Vivian had kept them, labels facing out in the order Vivian had organized them, chronological, from Kevin's first steps, March 1972, to last Easter at the house, April 2023, which Vivian had recorded 11 days before she died. He bought a VCR from a Goodwill in Anderson for $7. He set it on the TV stand. He plugged it in. He set it on the input Vivian had always used, Channel 3, because Channel 4 had static. He did not press play. Not yet. He was not ready. But the machine was there, and the tapes were there, and when the time came, if the time came, he would not have to go looking. One evening in June, sitting in the living room with the television dark, he walked to the cabinet. He took out Christmas Morning, 1991. He put it in the VCR. He pressed play. The screen filled with static, and then with the living room. This living room, the same room he was sitting in. And then with Kevin and Lloyd at 15 and 12, tearing wrapping paper off boxes under a tree. And then with Vivian's voice behind the camera saying, "Lloyd, hold it up so I can see it." And Lloyd holding up a basketball and grinning, and then with Vivian laughing, and Russell heard her laugh for the first time in 14 months, and he sat in the chair and he let it play. He watched 3 more tapes that week. He has been watching them since, 1 a week. He is not in a hurry. The Muncie Star Press ran the story on a Sunday. The Indianapolis Star picked it up. NPR's Weekend Edition did a segment in May about the Magnetic Video Corporation and the birth of the home video market, using the Pence tape as the anchor. A collector in Los Angeles who had bought the tape at the Heritage Auction wrote to Russell in June. He wrote that the tape was now displayed in a glass case in his media room beside a 1978 magnetic video catalog and a photograph of Andre Blay. He wrote that he had put a small card beside the tape that read, "Purchased at Sears, Muncie, Indiana, 1978, by Vivian Pence. Her favorite movie. Never opened." Russell read the letter twice. He put it in the cabinet beside the tapes. And the next Wednesday morning, back home in Muncie, Russell sat down at his usual booth at the Tally-Ho restaurant on Madison Street with his 2 oldest friends, Gene Burcham and Earl Stigall, the way he had every Wednesday for 23 years. Gene looked at him over the rim of his coffee mug. "Heard you made the Star Press, Russell." "Heard that. VHS tape, huh?" "VHS tape?" Earl shook his head. $5. $5, Russell agreed. The 3 of them laughed, the quiet, chest-deep laugh of old men who have lived long enough to know that the world rarely sees what matters, and that sometimes, if you wait long enough, it finally does. A kid in a pawn shop looked at that box and said $5. He didn't know. They never do. If stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel because some things have hidden worth,